There's a gas station in Memphis, Tennessee, on the corner of Union Avenue and Cleveland Street that looks completely ordinary. Modern pumps, convenience store attached. People stop there every day to fill up their tanks, buy coffee, maybe grab a lottery ticket. Nothing special about it. But in 1933, that spot was home to a different gas station, smaller, run by a man named Edward J. Eddie Brennan. And on a humid afternoon in July 1933, something happened at Eddie Brennan's gas station that became one of the most famous stories in American crime history. George "Machine Gun" Kelly pulled up to the pumps in a stolen Ford sedan. He was 37 years old, one of the most wanted criminals in America. Bank robber, kidnapper, murderer. He'd just pulled off the kidnapping of oil tycoon Charles Urschel, holding him for a $200,000 ransom, roughly $4.7 million in 2024 dollars. The FBI was hunting him across multiple states. His face was on wanted posters in every post office in the country. Kelly was driving through Memphis on his way to hide out in Texas. He needed gas, saw Eddie Brennan's station, pulled in. Eddie Brennan was 52 years old. He'd run to the gas station for 15 years. Quiet man, kept to himself, not the kind of person who looked for trouble. But Eddie had a problem. He'd been robbed 3 times in the past year. 3 separate incidents where criminals had stolen his daily receipts at gunpoint. Eddie was tired of being a victim, so he'd bought himself a gun, a .45 caliber revolver, kept it under the counter, decided that the next time someone tried to rob him, he'd fight back. On July 18th, 1933, at approximately 3:45 p.m., Eddie Brennan was about to make the biggest mistake and the luckiest escape of his life. Because when Machine Gun Kelly got out of his car to pump gas, Eddie Brennan didn't recognize him as a famous criminal. Eddie saw a well-dressed man in an expensive suit, driving a nice car, looking suspicious. And when Kelly reached into his jacket, reaching for his wallet to pay for the gas, Eddie interpreted it as reaching for a weapon. Eddie pulled his .45 revolver, pointed it directly at Machine Gun Kelly's face. "Don't move," Eddie said, his voice shaking. "Hands where I can see them. I know what you're doing. I know you're here to rob me. But it ain't happening. Not today." What happened next shocked everyone who witnessed it. Not because of violence, not because of a shootout, but because of what Machine Gun Kelly did in response to having a gun pointed at his face by a terrified gas station attendant. To understand what happened, you need to understand who Machine Gun Kelly was in July 1933. George Kelly Barnes was born on July 18th, 1895, in Memphis, Tennessee, which makes the gas station incident even more ironic, since it happened on his 38th birthday in his hometown. Kelly had grown up in a middle-class family, attended good schools, seemed destined for a normal life. But Kelly had a wild streak. He started bootlegging during Prohibition, got good at it, made serious money. Then he graduated to bank robbery. Between 1930 and 1933, Kelly and his gang robbed dozens of banks across the Southwest. stealing an estimated $1 million total. Kelly got his nickname, Machine Gun Kelly, from his wife, Catherine, who bought him a Thompson submachine gun and made him practice with it constantly. She'd tell people her husband was the best machine gunner in the country, could write his name with bullets on a barn wall. Kelly encouraged the reputation, started carrying the Thompson everywhere, used it in robberies, became famous for it. But Kelly's biggest crime, the one that made him the FBI's top priority in the summer of 1933, was the kidnapping of Charles Urschel. On July 22, 1933, 4 days after the gas station incident we're about to discuss, Kelly and his gang would kidnap Urschel from his home in Oklahoma City. They'd hold him for 9 days, demand $200,000 ransom, release him unharmed after the ransom was paid. But that kidnapping would trigger a massive FBI manhunt led by J. Edgar Hoover himself. The FBI would eventually track Kelly to a house in Memphis in September 1933, arrest him without firing a shot, and send him to Alcatraz for life. Kelly would spend the next 21 years in prison, dying at Leavenworth Penitentiary in 1954 at age 59 from a heart attack. But all of that was in the future. On July 18, 1933, Machine Gun Kelly was still free, still dangerous, still armed, and still very much someone you didn't want to mess with. Which makes what happened at Eddie Brennan's gas station even more remarkable. Machine Gun Kelly stood at the gas pump with Eddie Brennan's .45 revolver pointed at his face. His hand was still inside his jacket, frozen in place. Eddie was standing behind the pump, gun extended, finger on the trigger. His hand was shaking so badly the gun barrel was moving in small circles. "I said, hands where I can see them," Eddie repeated, louder this time. Kelly slowly removed his hand from his jacket. But instead of raising his hands in surrender, Kelly did something unexpected. He smiled. "Easy there, partner," Kelly said, his voice calm. "I'm not here to rob you. I'm just a traveler passing through. Need some gas for my car." "Bullshit," Eddie said, "because you're dressed too nice. Car's too clean. Nobody that well-dressed stops at a run-down gas station like mine unless they're up to something." Kelly looked down at his suit. He was wearing a custom-tailored, 3-piece suit that cost more than Eddie made in a month. Expensive shoes, diamond cufflinks. He looked like a banker or a businessman, not a gas station customer. "You got me," Kelly said, still smiling. "I'm dressed nice because I'm on my way to a meeting. Business meeting. In Texas. I stopped here because you're the first station I have seen in 20 miles. You're lying? Am I?" Kelly gestured at his car with his free hand, carefully, slowly making sure Eddie could see the movement. "Look in my car. You see any weapons? Any bags of money? Anything that suggests I'm here to rob you?" Eddie glanced at the Ford. The back seat was empty, except for a small suitcase. No guns visible. No obvious signs of criminal activity. But Eddie had been burned before, kept the gun pointed at Kelly. "Empty your pockets," Eddie demanded. "Slowly. Put everything on the hood of your car." This was Kelly's moment of decision. He was carrying a .38 revolver in a shoulder holster under his jacket. He was also carrying several $100s in cash from a recent bank robbery. If he followed Eddie's instructions, if he emptied his pockets, Eddie would see the gun and the money, and would know something was wrong. Kelly could pull his own gun, could shoot Eddie, could be gone before anyone responded. In Kelly's world, that was standard procedure. You didn't let civilians point guns at you. You eliminated the threat. But Kelly made a different choice. "Listen," Kelly said, his voice taking on a different tone. Less amused, more serious. "I'm going to tell you the truth, and then you're going to make a decision." "Fair?" "Keep talking," Eddie said. "You're right. I'm not just a businessman. I'm on the run. I'm wanted. You've probably seen my face on wanted posters. My name is George Kelly. They call me Machine Gun Kelly." Eddie's eyes went wide. His gun hand started shaking even harder. "Now I'm carrying a gun," Kelly continued. "I'm carrying cash. If you make me empty my pockets, you're gonna see both. And then you're gonna have a problem. Because you're gonna know who I am, and you're gonna feel like you need to do something about it. Call the police. Try to collect the reward money. Something." I could shoot you," Eddie stammered. "Right now. Citizen's arrest. You're wanted by the FBI." "You could try," Kelly agreed. "But look at your hand. Look at how much you're shaking. You've never shot anyone in your life, have you?" Eddie didn't answer. But his shaking, scared with your gun already shaking, scared with your gun already drawn. "I could pull mine and shoot you before you pulled that trigger. You know why? Because you're thinking about pulling the trigger. I've already decided. That's the difference between people like you and people like me." Eddie's face went pale. "But here's the thing," Kelly continued. "I don't want to shoot you. I don't want to add you to my list. I don't want to hurt you. I just want to buy some gas, pay you for it, and drive away. And if you let me do that, we both walk away from this alive. You get money for the gas. I get to Texas. Everyone wins. Why should I trust you?" Kelly reached into his pocket, slowly, carefully, with his other hand raised, so Eddie could see it wasn't going for a weapon. He pulled out a money clip, peeled off a $20 bill, placed it on the hood of the car. $20, Kelly said, "for $5 worth of gas. That's a $15 tip. Biggest tip you've made all month, probably. All you have to do is put that gun down, pump my gas, and forget you ever saw me." Eddie looked at the $20 bill. $20 was good money in 1933, very good money. "And if I don't?" Kelly sighed. "Then I pull my gun, we shoot at each other, and one or both of us dies. Maybe you get lucky and hit me. Maybe I get lucky and hit you. Maybe we both die bleeding out at a gas station. Is that really how you want this to end?" Eddie's gun hand was shaking so badly now that he could barely keep it pointed in Kelly's direction. "Put the gun down," Kelly said gently. "Just put it down. Take the money. Pump the gas. And in 5 minutes, I'll be gone. And this will just be a story you tell your friends over beers. Remember that time Machine Gun Kelly came to my station? That's a hell of a story. Better than remember that time I got killed by Machine Gun Kelly." For 30 seconds, Eddie Brennan stood there with the gun pointed at Kelly, trying to decide what to do. His hand was shaking. His heart was racing. He'd never felt fear like this in his life. Because he understood, suddenly and completely, that Kelly was right. If this turned into a shootout, Eddie was going to die. Kelly was a professional criminal. Eddie was a gas station attendant with a gun he'd bought 3 months ago and barely knew how to use. Slowly, Eddie lowered the gun. "Smart choice," Kelly said. "Now put it on the ground. Slide it away from you." Eddie set the gun on the pavement, kicked it gently. It slid about 6 feet away. Kelly walked over, picked up the one, ejected the bullets into his hand, handed the empty gun back to Eddie. "Here," Kelly said, "you'll want this back. But maybe next time, don't point it at people unless you're absolutely ready to use it. Pointing a gun at someone is serious business. You point it, you better be prepared to pull that trigger. Otherwise, you're just making threats you can't back up." Eddie took the gun with shaking hands. "Now pump my gas," Kelly said. "My $5 worth, regular." Eddie pumped the gas. His hands were still shaking so badly, he could barely work the pump. It took him 3 tries to get the nozzle into Kelly's tank. While Eddie pumped, Kelly leaned against his car, completely relaxed, like this was the most normal transaction in the world. When the pump clicked off at $5, Eddie removed the nozzle, hung it back on the pump. "Thank you," Kelly said. He picked up the $20 bill from the hood, handed it to Eddie. "Keep the change." Eddie took the money. Didn't say anything. Just stood there, stunned. Kelly got in his car, started the engine. Then he rolled down his window. "One more thing," Kelly said. "Don't call the police. Don't tell anyone about this. Not for at least a week. I'll be long gone by then. But if I hear that Memphis police are looking for me, 'cause some gas station attendant called them, I'll remember this address. I'll remember you. You understand?" Eddie nodded frantically. "Good man," Kelly said, and drove away. Eddie Brennan stood in his gas station, holding a $20 bill and an empty gun, watching Machine Gun Kelly's Ford disappear down Union Avenue. Then Eddie's legs gave out. He sat down hard on the pavement and started laughing. Hysterical, relieved, terrified laughter. Eddie Brennan kept his word. He didn't call the police, didn't tell anyone about the encounter, not for a week. But on July 26th, 8 days after the incident, Eddie read in the newspaper that Machine Gun Kelly had kidnapped Charles Urschel, that the FBI was hunting Kelly across multiple states, that there was a $10,000 reward for information leading to Kelly's capture. $10,000. More money than Eddie would make in 5 years of running his gas station. Eddie thought about calling the FBI, thought about telling them Kelly had been in Memphis a week earlier, thought about that reward money. But he didn't make the call, because Eddie remembered Kelly's warning, remembered the way Kelly had looked at him, remembered understanding, in that moment, that Kelly was absolutely serious about coming back if Eddie betrayed him. So Eddie kept quiet. Even when the FBI came to Memphis in September to arrest Kelly, Eddie didn't come forward, didn't tell them about the gas station encounter. It wasn't until 1947, 14 years later, after Kelly had been in prison for over a decade, that Eddie finally told the story. He was at a bar, drinking with friends, and someone mentioned Machine Gun Kelly's arrest. Eddie, drunk and feeling safe now that Kelly was locked away in Leavenworth, told the whole story. Word spread. A local reporter heard about it, interviewed Eddie, wrote an article. The story made it into the Memphis newspaper in 1948 under the headline, "Local Man Held Machine Gun Kelly at Gunpoint and Lived to Tell About It." The article described the encounter in detail. Eddie explained how he'd pulled his gun on Kelly, how Kelly had talked him down, how Kelly had paid for the gas and driven away peacefully. The article concluded, Mr. Brennan's encounter with the infamous criminal demonstrates that even the most dangerous men can sometimes choose mercy over violence. Or perhaps Kelly simply recognized that killing a gas station attendant over $5 worth of fuel would bring more trouble than it was worth. Either way, Eddie Brennan considers himself the luckiest man in Memphis. Machine Gun Kelly never publicly commented on the Eddie Brennan incident. He was arrested in September 1933, tried, convicted, and sentenced to life in prison at Leavenworth. Later transferred to Alcatraz, spent the rest of his life behind bars. But in 1952, 2 years before Kelly died, a prison chaplain at Leavenworth had a conversation with him. The chaplain kept notes of their discussions, and years later, portions of those notes were published in a book about famous prisoners. One entry, dated March 1952, contains this passage. Kelly spoke today about his years as a fugitive. He mentioned an incident in Memphis where a gas station attendant pulled a gun on him. Kelly laughed while telling the story, said the man was braver than most police officers I'd encountered, but dumber, too. I asked Kelly why he didn't shoot the man. Kelly's response was interesting. I was on the run. I didn't need the attention. Shooting some poor gas station guy over $5 worth of gas would have brought every cop in Tennessee down on me. Besides, the man was terrified. He thought he was being brave, standing up to robbers. He had no idea who I really was. Once he knew, he made the smart choice. Put the gun down. That took guts. I respected it. Kelly also mentioned he sometimes wondered what happened to the man. Said if he ever got out of prison, he'd try to find him, buy him a drink, thank him for not being stupid enough to pull that trigger. We both could have died that day, Kelly said. Instead, we both lived. That's better than most stories from that era. Kelly died on July 18, 1954, his 59th birthday, from a heart attack at Leavenworth. He never got out, never bought Eddie that drink. The Machine Gun Kelly incident became famous in law enforcement circles as an example of criminal psychology under pressure. FBI training materials in the 1940s and 1950s used the story to teach agents about how professional criminals think differently than civilians. The analysis went like this. Why Kelly didn't shoot. Pragmatism. Shooting. Eddie would attract attention. Police. Witnesses. Investigations. Kelly was on the run. He needed to stay invisible. Risk assessment. Eddie was shaking so badly, he probably couldn't hit Kelly, even if he fired. Kelly assessed the threat as low. Cost-benefit. The cost of shooting. Eddie, in attention, investigation, potential witnesses, outweighed the benefit, $5 worth of gas he was willing to pay for anyway. Why Kelly's approach worked? Honesty. Kelly told Eddie the truth about who he was. This created a paradoxical sense of trust. Eddie knew exactly what he was dealing with. Respect. Kelly treated Eddie like an intelligent adult, capable of making rational decisions, not like a victim to be intimidated. Offering a way out. Kelly viewed Eddie a face-saving option. Eddie could lower his gun, take the money, and feel like he'd made a smart business decision, rather than feeling like he'd been intimidated into backing down. The FBI analysis concluded, Kelly demonstrated sophisticated psychological manipulation by being honest about the threat he posed while simultaneously offering a peaceful resolution. He gave his victim a rational reason to choose survival over heroism. This approach is more effective than simple intimidation because it allows the victim to feel they made a choice rather than being forced to submit. The encounter between Eddie Brennan and Machine Gun Kelly reveals something important about how violence actually works versus how people think it works. Most people imagine that criminals, especially famous violent criminals, respond to threats with immediate violence. Someone points a gun at you, you shoot them. That's the Hollywood version. But professional criminals, the ones who survive for years, understand that violence is a tool, not a default response. Violence has costs: attention, investigation, risk. Sometimes the smart play is de-escalation. Kelly understood this. He could have shot Eddie, probably should have, by the logic of his world. Eddie had seen his face, knew his name, could identify him to police. But Kelly did the math. Shooting Eddie meant gunshots, attract attention. Dead body means police investigation. Witnesses might have seen Kelly's car, gotten a license plate, every cop in Memphis looking for him within hours, forced to abandon his route to Texas, find a new way out, not shooting. Eddie meant $5 for gas, $15 tip to ensure Eddie's cooperation. Peaceful departure with no attention. Continued route to Texas as planned. One scared gas station attendant who'd probably keep his mouth shut out of fear. Easy choice, smart choice, and it worked. Kelly got his gas, got to Texas, remained free for another 2 months before being arrested for the Urshel kidnapping, an arrest that had nothing to do with the Eddie Brennan encounter. In 2003. But in Memphis, among people who in 2003. But in Memphis, among people who know the history, the corner of Union and Cleveland is known as the place where that gas station guy pulled a gun on Machine Gun Kelly. There's no historical marker, no plaque, no recognition of what happened there, but the story lives on. Told in bars, in history classes, in books about famous criminals. The story of the bravest or stupidest gas station attendant in Memphis history. The man who pointed a gun at one of America's most dangerous criminals and lived to tell about it. Eddie Brennan died in 1962 at age 81. His obituary in the Memphis newspaper mentioned that he'd once had an encounter with the famous criminal Machine Gun Kelly. No details, just that one line. But people who knew Eddie knew the full story. And they'd tell it at his funeral, at family gatherings, to their children and grandchildren. The story of the day Eddie pulled a gun on Machine Gun Kelly. The day Kelly could have killed Eddie but chose not to. The day $20 and some smooth talking prevented a murder. And the lesson embedded in that story, that sometimes the most dangerous response is no response at all. That intelligence beats bravado. That survival sometimes means swallowing your pride and accepting that you're outmatched. That lesson remains relevant. Eddie Brennan learned it the hard way. But he learned it, and he lived. That's more than a lot of people from that era can say. That wraps it up for today. On July 18th, 1933, gas station attendant Eddie Brennan pulled a gun on a well-dressed old customer he suspected of being a robber. The customer was Machine Gun Kelly, one of the FBI's most wanted criminals. Kelly could have shot Eddie. Probably should have. Instead, Kelly talked Eddie down, told him the truth about who he was, offered him $20 for $5 of gas, and drove away peacefully. Eddie was so terrified, he sat down on the pavement and laughed hysterically. He kept quiet about the encounter for 14 years. And Machine Gun Kelly, for all his violence and criminal activity, made a choice that day that saved both their lives. One confrontation, one smart decision, one gas station encounter that showed sometimes the most dangerous men know when violence isn't the answer. If this story hit you, drop a comment below. Subscribe for more stories where intelligence beats intimidation and survival requires knowing when to back down. See you in the next one.